Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome you to Tim Rowe's 6-String Techniques. Hello everybody, welcome to Tim Rowe's 6-String Techniques. This isn't really a formal lesson today. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about myself, where I came from, the reason I love and play guitar, play music. Just talk to you about some of those things today. I think when I was probably, I was born in 1969, so this year I'll be 49 years old. And I think I saw the guitar for the first time in a church up in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois. That would have probably been as far back as I can recall, maybe the early 70s. There was a man, his last name was Walker. I don't know if I ever know this man's first name. I think I mentioned to you guys before, I saw a Fender Stratocaster, and the rest is history. From that point, I just developed a severe love for music. It's always been there. And I've had guitars in my hands since an extremely early age. I don't consider myself to be any kind of virtuoso. It's just something I've always had to work at. And that may be why I'm able to teach well. Understanding this instrument and being able to break it down requires work. It requires obtaining knowledge and the ability to be able to communicate an instrument and how it is played. I have a lot of influences, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. Part of those are probably stemming back to brothers and sisters that I had. My mom was very musical. She was a piano player, played mostly by ear. And it was just something that her and her brothers did. She comes from a large family. We're basically based in North Carolina. And I think she had, I believe, 6 brothers, to be honest with you. Large family. And all of them played guitars. Some of them built guitars. They built lap steel guitars. People refer to those as Hawaiian guitars, a slide guitar. I saw that throughout my youth. And I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, Illinois, and was exposed to a lot of blues, a lot of jazz. I would see these things on the street, just a lot of great musicians. So that was very influential to me early on. And from that point, I had a sister who was close friends with somebody at a radio station up in the Chicago area. He worked for a radio station, and I think she would get albums through babysitting, and I would listen to those albums, and she turned me on to a lot of bands. One of the guitarists that hit me early on was David Gilmour, and Pink Floyd was one of those. Thinking back, probably Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath. Love rock and roll. I'm a big metalhead, and just love it. But my exposure to other guitarists was always there. Willie Nelson, a lot of the country artists early on, and so on. So there's just a lot there. There's a lot of background stuff. Probably too hard for me to mention in a short period of time or even think about. Eventually, I wound up through trying to play. I don't know that I took any formal guitar lessons until later. I took piano as a very young man. I probably was maybe 10 years old, right in that time frame, up in the Chicagoland area. Did that for a few years. Played saxophone in junior high school, and I might add, probably not very well. I always joke about that. I dug the instrument, but then again, I didn't. I latched on to guitar, and that was it. I did go to the University of Southern Illinois and study classical guitar with Joseph Breznikar for just a short time, a few semesters. I gained a lot of knowledge there about music theory and just structure, practice habits, performance. So those things were extremely helpful. That little venture was helpful for me. And during that time, I was also exposed to classical music more than I was earlier on, where I started to pay attention to Andre Segovia, Julian Bream, and just so on. Just so many, Christopher Parkening, so many classical guitarists, Sophocles Papas. And as a result of those classical guitar studies, I've actually used that format in my teaching, my instruction, since I started, which was 1989, late 88, early 89. So that classical guitar foundation, everything with down to how we hold the instrument came from that. Um, and I'm influenced by so many different guitar players. Um, there's not a day that goes by, well, really, or a week or a month where I don't see or hear another guitarist that just I admire or blows my mind. There's always something to learn. It never stops. The learning never stops, and that's what's so great about the guitar. It's kind of, to me, like a really awesome video game that you truly never beat. The minute that you get really good at something, something else comes along that you want to learn. So it's a fantastic instrument and just a great all around thing. And it's so exciting for me, and I'm glad to be able to share these things with you guys. I want to let you know that when you're studying the guitar, the 6 string guitar, acoustic or electric, you're also learning the 12 string guitar, for instance. You are learning the bass guitar, 4 string, five, so many different stringed basses. But you're learning all this stuff and being able to transfer that from one instrument to another. A lot of people ask me about other stringed instruments. Some of them are very doable, and some of them are completely different animals. So you learn this as you go on. Um, Other influences for me would have been a lot of the rock and roll players because that's just what I latched onto. Um, I loved the guitar tandems, the dual guitar bands, which I'm sure stem way back with Thin Lizzy. I loved Gary Moore. I love KK Downing and Glenn Tipton and Judas Priest were huge for me. Um, the guitarists in the old Scorpions band, um, which would entail Uli John Roth, Michael Schenker, Rudolf Schenker, Matthias Jabs. A lot of the guitar tandem stuff, Iron Maiden, Dave Murray, Adrian Smith, Steve Harris's bass playing, along with all the prog rock bands, certainly Alex Lifeson, Geddy Lee. So not just guitar players for me, but bass players too. I admired. I admire the keyboard players, the guys in Deep Purple, Ritchie Blackmore, um, Vivian Campbell, Ronnie James Dio, the singers, the. So for me, it wasn't just the guitarist. It was a lot of the other aspects of each band, the drummers. I listened to everything. I learned early on to separate the instruments in my ear and listen to each individual. That took time. Still to this day, have to listen closely to separate those things. I think we all do. Um, I adored Randy Rhoads, Yngwie Malmsteen. When I heard Randy Rhoads, when I listened to his recordings, which were mostly done in the early '80s through 1981, I believe. Um, it sounds like those recordings were done yesterday to me, and that's rare. Those recordings still stand as far as their tonal quality, the aggressive passion in the playing, and the musical composition. Um, the same thing with a lot of the guys that came out of that so-called shredder thing, Mike Varney's label that produced Paul Gilbert, Tony McAlpine, Marty Friedman, Jason Becker, God bless him, that's suffering with Lou Gehrig's disease. Um, Probably is one of the most innovative players, and it's just kudos to him for his struggles and his fight with that disease. There are just so many great players out there. I've not even scratched the surface on the blues guys. Buddy Guy, Albert King, Albert Collins, B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Eric Johnson, the list, Robert Cray, Toronzo Cannon. The list goes on and on. Those guys were hugely influential to me. I'm very comfortable playing blues. Um, this is and there's just too many to mention, but You know, you guys go out there and study these guitar players, grab everybody, latch on to everybody that you can, learn about them, read about what they used, what kind of equipment they used, read about their stories. So, anyway, I hope that's kind of informative to you and helps you learn a little bit about myself. And I look forward to working with you guys again soon in our other lesson programs. Take care.